Before I get started with the episode, I want to take a moment to think about Bob Trumpy, who passed away this Sunday at the age of 80. And remember, I just talked about him last week when Dave Lapham went into the Bengals Ring of Honor. One of the people I said I thought really deserved to get into the Ring of Honor, and obviously does deserve. All the players that are nominated, arguably, except for Dave Lapham, deserve to get into the Ring of Honor. But Bob Trumpy was a legend when I was a kid. On Fox, it was Pat Summerall and John Madden. And then on NBC, it was Dick Enberg and Bob Trumpy calling the biggest NFL games. So I've got lots of memories, not only of football games, but all kinds of sporting events that Bob Trumpy would call for NBC because he had such a legendary voice for broadcasting. It was an unbelievably deep voice you can only get when you, I don't know if he smoked, but Bob Trumpy passes away without getting into the Bengals Ring of Honor and getting that honor while he's alive, much like Ken Riley. And that's it. A shame that they're having to put guys in posthumously, but it's crazy how there's so many similarities between this game and the Jets game, who just lost Nick Mangold, one of their former players and legends, at the young age of 41. And this was a game that the Bengals, it looked in a lot of ways like they were going to win it like the Jets did, but they didn't pull this one out for Bob Trumpy, unfortunately. So wanted to take a minute and remember Bob Trumpy before this episode. Hello, and welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from a realistic, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 109. This is the Week 9 recap episode where the Cincinnati Bengals lost in heartbreaking fashion again, this time to the Chicago Bears, 47-42 at home. One of the highest scoring games of this NFL season, one of the most back and forth, crazy games we have seen all NFL season, not just for the Bengals, but for the entire league. And this game felt in some ways like the previous game against the Jets, except the roles were kind of reversed. This time the Bengals were the ones coming from behind. It looked like they pulled off the miraculous victory. This time the announcers from CBS were all over that two-point conversion. They knew what was going on. Down 14, you gotta go for two. They seemed totally confused when the Jets were doing it, but now, can't sneak anything past Adam Archuleta and Spiro Ditas. And it looked like, the Bengals did the switcheroo. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, all that kind of stuff. They were going to beat the Bears at home. Everybody was going to go crazy. And then 54 seconds left. Bears have one timeout. They convert a 58-yard pass from Caleb Williams to Colston Loveland, which ended up sealing the game. Bears go on top by 5. They missed their two-point conversion, but it didn't matter because the Bengals weren't able to have enough time to get down the field. Joe Flacco, he didn't get a chance to set his feet for that deep Hail Mary pass, but it could have been an issue with his shoulder because we knew going into this game, Joe Flacco was dealing with intense pain in his right throwing shoulder. Wasn't really able to get enough onto the ball to even get anywhere close to that Hail Mary at the end of the game. So the Bengals didn't really have anything to celebrate after this game. A lot of players were understandably frustrated and upset after the game. We heard comments from a lot of the offensive players, including running back Chase Brown, who basically said, what the fuck? All the fans were saying after that game, what the fuck? How do we lose this game? Why can't we just finish it off and finish one of these games and get a win? But now the Bengals fall to 3-6 on the season. They're 2-3 at home. Now they've got a bye coming up in front of this game where they got to go on the road to play the Pittsburgh Steelers, who unfortunately won. The Ravens also won. So the Ravens are 3-5. Bengals are 3-6. They're actually behind the Ravens in the AFC North standings at this point. They fall down to third, one slot ahead of the Browns, who have 2 wins themselves. It's so crazy how close this AFC North division is. Bengals are still hanging around. There's no quit in this team and this coaching staff. And unfortunately, especially on the defensive coaching staff, Zach Taylor today, Monday, came out and said absolutely he has full confidence in his defensive staff and his coaches to figure it out. Not going to fire Al Golden, not going to fire anybody. They're not going to trade for anybody, apparently. All the Bengals still are on the roster. They haven't gotten rid of Trey Hendrickson or Cam Taylor-Britt or Logan Wilson or McKinley Jackson or any of the players who requested a trade or seemingly would be good candidates to be traded for draft picks or something. But the Bengals decided to stay the course. Expected. Like I said on last episode or 2 episodes ago, whenever it was, status quo is here to stay for the Bengals. They love the status quo. They don't want to change anything. Don't ruffle any feathers. They had their Fan of the Year announcement, and it was some guy who's been a season ticket holder for like 47 years in a row. I can't even imagine some of the seasons this guy must have paid a bunch of money to go and watch terrible games like this one. I mean, this wasn't a terrible game, though. This was a good game if you weren't a Bengals fan. For everybody outside of Cincinnati and the Bengals fandom, this was a great game to watch. And this is the type of game that the NFL wanted with this whole kickoff rule. They changed the kickoffs. They want more kickoffs. They want better field position for the offenses. And so teams are taking over with better field position. That leads to more scoring. And the Bengals kicked off this game with a kickoff return for a touchdown by Charlie Jones. It was another one of these very similar like the Cleveland Browns game from last season where Charlie Jones basically ran it through the middle of the field untouched. The blocking was so good that all he had to do was run in a straight line and outrun the kicker pretty much. And so Charlie Jones, he's always good for that one touchdown a year. It seems like he had that punt return against the Ravens. I think it was his rookie season or 2 years ago. And then last year, the one against the Browns was a little bit more difficult than this one, honestly. This one, I don't even know if anybody got a hand on him. He didn't have to break any tackles or anything. And good job by Darren Simmons, the special teams coach, on this particular play to see something that made the Bears vulnerable to this return. But Bengals went up 7-0. Everything was looking in their favor early, but the only problem was the Bears were able to move the ball effectively on this Bengals defense, even though they were missing their top 2 running backs. DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson were both out for the Bears. Their leading rushers. That meant Kyle Monangai, a 7th-round pick out of Rutgers, was going to get his first start in the NFL. And all Kyle Monangai did was rush 26 carries for 176 yards. And then he also added 3 catches for 22 yards, total of 198 all-purpose yards for Kyle Monangai. Like I mentioned, 7th-round pick, which is, you'll notice, after the Bengals drafted their 6th-round pick, Taj Brooks. In this game, Taj Brooks had 1 carry for 1 yard and no catches. So the Bengals scouting department is in the crossfires for a number of reasons. Everybody's focused on the defense, and rightly so. Right now, you won't believe this. The Bengals have 3 of the lowest graded, not only 3 of the lowest graded rookies in the entire rookie class from last year, Bengals have 3 of the lowest graded PFF grades for players on defense in the entire NFL. The 2 linebackers, rookie linebackers, Demetrius Knight Jr. and Barrett Carter, are the 2 lowest graded players in the entire NFL. I think they're number 82 and 81 out of all linebackers in the NFL. And then Shamar Stewart, 1st-round pick. The guy people were comparing to Myles Garrett coming out of college. They were like, oh, they went to the same school. They've got the same size body, and he was jumping out of the gym and doing all this stuff, but he didn't have any sacks. But don't worry about the sacks and the statistics. Once he gets to the NFL, we'll figure it out, right? I mean, Shamar Stewart had a couple tackles in this game, but he also was getting just driven off the ball. There's clips going around on social media of him just getting absolutely pancaked into the dirt or the AstroTurf, whatever you want to call it, by Darnell Wright, the right tackle for the Chicago Bears. Shamar Stewart, and the rest of the defensive line. I don't need to call him out specifically, but Bengals defensive line in general, all those guys, Chris Jenkins, B.J. Hill, T.J. Slayton, Miles Murphy, you could go on and on. Jordan Jefferson got some snaps in this game. None of those guys were effective, really, at stopping the run or tackling Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams was playing like he was in college, which is to say scrambling around, running in circles, juking a lot of guys out, but he wasn't that effective when he was outside the pocket, like binding receivers down the field. That's the thing. And Caleb was looking frustrated at his receivers, like nobody was getting open. But from a receiver point of view, it's very difficult to try to play with a quarterback like Caleb Williams because you don't know which way he's going to go. Is he going to go left? Is he going to go right? Is he going to stay in the middle of the pocket? So it's hard for the receivers to know how to get open. And then they're trying to mirror him all the way down the field. They get tired, as much as Caleb probably was getting tired of running around in the backfield in this game. But somehow, when the moment required it, Caleb Williams was able to stand in the pocket, especially on that final throw of the game, and hit an absolute laser up the seam to Loveland for that touchdown over the linebackers in front of the safeties. Of course, the tackling on this play that won the Bears the game was atrocious. In typical fashion, like we've seen all season, Jordan Battle and Geno Stone out in open space are not great tacklers. They're able to come up inside the box and make the occasional run stop or tackle a guy after he's already been kind of wrapped up. But we saw Jordan Battle just try to put a shoulder into Colston Loveland, who's their rookie tight end. And Loveland just kind of bounced off because he's got a big weight advantage on Jordan Battle. Geno Stone coming in with a bad angle, completely missed on this tackle, and then it was off to the races for Loveland. It was kind of an interesting play because the Bears didn't have any timeouts, and the time was ticking down. I think it was like 25 seconds at that point. If he had slid down, because the Bears were only down by 1 point. Bengals went up 42-41. All the Bears needed to get was a field goal. So theoretically, Loveland could have caught it and then gone down, and the Bears could have spiked the ball, stopped the clock, and kicked the field goal. But he ran all the way into the end zone, and it left 17 seconds left on the clock. But going into this, there was so much talk about who is going to be the quarterback for the Bengals. Luckily, it was Joe Flacco all game. We didn't see any Jake Browning. Some of the reporters suggested, maybe they should have put Jake Browning in for the Hail Mary at the end of the game. No, leave Jake Browning off of the field. We don't need to see any Jake Browning. Even if Joe Flacco is injured and his shoulder is killing him, nobody wants to see Jake Browning for the rest of the season. But Joe Flacco, to his credit, had a career-high passing in this game, 470 yards. He was 31 of 47, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. One of them was on that last play where it was just heaving up Hail Mary, so you can't really count that. But everybody in this Bengals organization had a lot of admiration for Joe Flacco and what he was able to do, considering how hurt he really was. We don't know the pain and the extent of Joe Flacco's injuries, but he mentioned that he got some help throwing the ball. And you could interpret that multiple different ways. You could think maybe Joe Flacco meant the first way I took it was it wasn't just him out there. He had teammates out there. It's a team game. He was throwing to guys like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Andre Iosivas, who we'll get to. But then it kind of made it seem like, he meant help, like physical help to relieve the pain that he was feeling. He also apparently got a pain-killing injection last week during the game so he could come out and play for the rest of that final series. And then Thursday, when they needed him to practice once to kind of get some reps with the other starters and install the plays they wanted to run for this week, he got maybe another pain-killing injection. I don't know how that works in terms of whether it is able to decrease the pain the more you do it. Like if you keep doing it week after week after week, is it going to still be effective? Is he still going to be able to play? And is that safe? And is that really, I know like fans don't care. They don't care about the players' health and safety. They want them to get out there. Oh, you got a concussion? Well, how come you're not back yet? But for Joe Flacco, I would be concerned about his long-term health. You don't want to just keep shooting up like painkillers every week or every day you have to play football for the rest of your life. So hopefully it's something that the bye week will help him heal up. But like I said, that's at his age, and depending on the severity of the injury, that might be something he's dealing with pain and discomfort for the rest of his career. They're going to have to manage that. And how much does he really want to play for this Bengals team if they're not going to get wins? Like, this would have been such a great win. The story you could tell for ages of Joe Flacco throwing for 470 yards and 4 touchdowns, and the Bengals had an amazing comeback victory, except for that part where they lost. It all sounded great. There were so many great moments of the game. This was a T. Higgins game. T. Higgins busted out in this game, 7 catches on 9 targets, 121 yards, including 2 touchdowns, long of 44, where it looked on the 44-yard touchdown, it looked like the Bears defender was in the perfect position to intercept the pass. He had great defense, and he even said he thought he was about to intercept it. And then all of a sudden, here comes T. Higgins, and his long arms stretched out right before the ball came down, caught it, and ran into the end zone for a touchdown. It was a remarkable throw and catch by Flacco and T. Higgins. But Flacco was going deep all game. He hit a pass to Andre Iosivas up the sidelines for 28 yards. Flacco even completed a 27-yard pass to Mitch Tinsley in this game. Another great play where I can't remember if they called defensive pass interference on the guy who was guarding Tinsley, but again, guys draped all over Mitch Tinsley, and he still made the catch. So as much as I love Andre Iosivas, and Andre Iosivas had a great game, including a touchdown in this one, Iosivas had 5 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown on 7 targets. He actually had 1 touchdown that was waved off because Andre, right before the ball arrived, he was running a route in the back of the end zone, and he put his foot out of bounds. And you are able in the NFL to come back in bounds and catch it after you go out, but you have to reestablish with both feet in bounds before you touch the ball. In this instance, Andre only got 1 foot back in bounds before he caught it, and then his second foot came down, so that made it an incomplete pass. But he redeemed himself a little bit and scored a touchdown that looked like it was going to be the game winner. That was the go-ahead touchdown at the end to put the Bengals up. That tied them, and then after the extra point, Bengals went ahead by 1 point, but it was not enough to hold off this Bears offense. Speaking of Bears offense, they combined for a total of 576 yards on 76 plays, 7.6 yards per play. And actually, the Bengals on offense were right there with the Bears. It's that the only difference was the Bears ran 76 total plays to the Bengals 65. But the Bengals had 495 yards. That's same 7.6 yards per play. But there was a very stark contrast in the way that teams went about it. For the Bengals, it was all passing. Out of 495 yards, 449 were passing. They only had 46 yards of rushing in the game. And as we know, the Bengals are the least effective team at running the ball. So that wasn't a total surprise, but Chase Brown, 37 yards on 11 carries. And since the Bengals were trailing late in the game, Zach Taylor always is going to pull out the old chestnut of, well, that's just how the kind of game went. We couldn't really afford to run because we were down. But Bears didn't seem to have any problem. They ran it for over 283 yards rushing in a game. 283 yards rushing by one team in an NFL game. I can't believe that. They had nearly as much passing yardage. They had 293 passing, 283 rushing against this Bengals defense. They could pretty much do whatever they wanted, including a bunch of trick plays. The Bears were running double passes. They ran basically a Philly special where they handed it off to the running back, handed it off to the wide receiver who comes around, throws it to the quarterback for a touchdown. Caleb Williams had 2 catches in this game. Actually, they ran their backup quarterback onto the field, Tyson Bagent. did a double pass to Bagent. Apparently he was looking for another receiver over the middle of the field, but he was covered, so he threw it back to Caleb Williams, who had blockers in front of him, kind of like a screen pass to Caleb Williams, the quarterback, and he picked up a first down on that play. I go to the box score and check the receivers. Caleb Williams, not only did he was 20 for 34 for 280 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, he also caught 2 passes for 22 yards and a touchdown. But watching this game was such a stark contrast in the two quarterback styles of play. You had on the one hand Caleb Williams frenetically running all over the field like a little jitterbug, spinning out of potential sacks and trying to make plays outside the pocket. And then on the other side, you had Joe Flacco, like the pocket passer, standing back there, not moving, just standing like a statue, just reading the defense, firing the ball down the field over and over. He had over 300 yards of passing in that second half, Joe Flacco. He was just launching passes, and more times than not, the Bengals were coming down and making big plays. And that's not to say that the Bengals defense didn't make any plays of their own. We saw multiple, I guess not really hits on Caleb Williams, but they got a couple sacks on him. They got in his face. They made life difficult for him. We saw Joseph Osai had a sack. I forget who else had the second sack in this game. B.J. Hill got credit for another sack. 2 sacks against Caleb Williams. But, and hey, even Cam Taylor-Britt had a nice pass breakup. He kind of held DJ Moore maybe on the route, but he broke up a pass. DJ Turner had a nice pass breakup. But it just wasn't enough. And the thing that they were really missing was a turnover. They let the Bears move the ball all the way up and down the field and didn't force any fumbles, didn't intercept any of Caleb Williams' passes. And then the Bengals turned the ball over multiple times. Joe Flacco got hit, strip sacked, fumbled, ball came out. He had another interception late in the game that looked like it was going to be a pick 6. And there was about 5 minutes left to go. Bengals were driving, trying to get back in within a 1-score game, and then Joe Flacco threw an interception to Edmonds, who ran it back. A couple plays before that, it looked like he threw another interception, but there was a defensive penalty holding on one of the Bears defenders who was holding Jamar Chase. That pass got tipped up in the air and intercepted. So the Bengals were lucky they got to keep the ball, but then just a couple plays later, Bears intercepted the pass. Looked like it was going to be a pick 6, but they ruled that Chase Brown got like a fingertip on the Bears linebacker before he caught the pass and went and put a knee down on the ground. Similar type of play happened earlier in the game where it looked like T. Higgins had a big gain, but he got his knee down on the ground and somebody had touched him, so he was down, didn't get that big gain he was looking for. But Joe Flacco did lots of great things, but those interceptions and the fumble, maybe you could say that was the difference in this game, but there's so much, I don't want to say blame. That's the thing, when a team loses the game, all the people who root for the team want to get angry at someone, get the pitchforks out. We need to fire someone because they feel frustration, they feel disappointment, and they want to take that emotion out on somebody. They want their pound of flesh, you could say. And so, there's no reason to blame somebody. Like I said, they're not trying to lose the game. I know people want to get upset and say, they're not trying or whatever. They don't have pride, which is something I saw, which I disagree with. You can't call out these guys for like personally saying that they don't have pride in what they're doing. That, I would never say that or question somebody's effort unless it was just totally obvious that they gave up. Like, I didn't see any lack of effort by the Bengals. That's the thing. There's no quit in the Bengals. They were trying the entire time. Even on the plays where they were getting beat, they were still trying, just they're not good. Like, there's a difference between not caring and not being good. And the Bengals just aren't that good. And even, like, I'm hearing even the radio announcers for the Bengals, Dan Horde and Dave Lapham, they are even acknowledging that the Bengals don't have the talent on the roster to compete with the other teams. And basically calling out Duke Tobin and the rest of the scouting department and saying, like, these guys aren't doing a good job of assembling this team. The Bengals are never going to admit that. Zach Taylor gets up in front of the microphone and says, "Oh, we got everything we need right here. We're going to get it turned around. We'll figure it out. Don't worry. We got," and they say, "Why are you so confident?" "Well, because we've done it before." That's his thing. He keeps falling back on as well. Things weren't looking good, but then we went to the Super Bowl, remember? But you can't say that every year. You can't just be like, "Well, this is like this is intentional. Like they're intentionally losing a bunch of games this season because this is all part of the plan, and then they're going to go back to the Super Bowl right after this." Like, you can't just keep trotting out that excuse of, "You guys didn't believe in me before, and then we went to the Super Bowl, see?" Like, eventually, this is going to run its course. I don't know how long it's going to be. How many 40-yard game or 40-point games and 500-yard offensive performances is Al Golden's defense going to allow? And they're just going to keep putting him out. Like, Terrell Austin was fired by the Bengals halfway through his first season for not even this bad of a defense. Like, his defense was bad, but it wasn't this bad. And Al Golden still has a job, and we still believe in Al Golden. He's the right guy for the job. Oh, yeah. I don't know, man. It's that messaging, to me, is getting stale. And I can't put it all on Zach Taylor because I know, just like the players get coaching, Zach Taylor gets coaching from the media relations department of the Bengals. They have a media relations director, Emily Parker. And if you watch the games, you'll see this woman, blonde-haired lady, standing directly behind Zach Taylor the entire game. I have no idea why she's there. What does she have to do in terms of media relations while Zach Taylor is calling the offensive plays? Maybe she's there to give him pointers about how he should look when the camera's on him. I don't know what the deal is, but she is always hovering right beside him, right in his pocket. So I'm sure right before Zach Taylor goes to give one of these press conferences, Emily Taylor is giving him little coaching points about what to say. Here's what, the points you need to hit in your speech or whenever you're answering these questions. Here's what you need to say. This is the point that is going to make the team look good. It's all about protecting the team and making the team, showing them in the best possible light, which I understand. But the consistent, we're fine, we'll just, with plenty of football left, we're going to be playing for championships, all that kind of stuff, is really repetitive, monotonous, and difficult for fans to hear. Last week, a lot of people were talking about how fans were inundating the Bengals ticket office on Monday morning, calling to cancel their season tickets. I don't know if that was actually true, because that's one of those things you see going around on social media. People can say, I called the Bengals and they wouldn't cancel my tickets. But who knows if that's actually true or not. One thing I can tell you is I saw fans leaving the Bengals game early again after it looked like the Bengals were going to go down by 20 points on that pick six. Fans were just heading for the exits. Then all of a sudden, the Bengals come all the way back. They take a 1-point lead and the stadium's halfway empty. So win or lose, I will repeat, do not leave the game early, because all those fans who left, okay, yes, the Bengals lost, but they could have won. It was right there for the taking, and all those fans would have missed it. So let that be a lesson to you. If you ever go to an NFL football game, do not leave early. But speaking of fans in the stands, especially towards the end of the game, it sounded like there were a lot of Chicago Bears fans. They showed a bunch of people dressed up like Mike Ditka for Halloween in the stands. And the only thing that the Bengals, I think, got lucky on was the fact that the Bears, most of their fans were wearing orange and navy, which looked very similar on TV to orange and black. So the Bears fans kind of blended in much better than the Detroit Lions fans wearing their all blue during the stripe out. But you could hear during the game, whenever a call would go for the Bears, there'd be a loud cheer. And it was confusing to me because the referee would announce something, and I'd hear a cheer, and I'd think, something good happened for the Bengals. But then it was for the Bears because that was a bunch of Bears fans cheering. But this game, I think they said there was 8 lead changes in the game. It could have been 9. I can't remember. I lost track. So many lead changes in this game. It was back and forth, back and forth. Not much defense by either team. And that was kind of expected. When I looked at the Bears' record, all their wins came against teams that weren't that great. You look at the Bears, they lost to the Vikings and the Lions, but then the Bears beat the Cowboys, the Raiders, the Commanders, the Saints, then lost to the Ravens without Lamar Jackson. Now they've beat the Bengals, in one of their closest games. But in all those games, I mean, Cowboys have a terrible defense. Raiders are no good. Commanders aren't good, especially without Jaden Daniels. And Saints are essentially tanking on this whole season. They're not very good at all. So the Bears don't have a lot of what you'd call quality wins against great opponents. And I'm not sure I would put the Bengals in that category either. But this was going to be a close game. This wasn't going to be some kind of a complete domination by either side. The Bengals had plenty of offense. You got Jamar Chase, you've got T. Higgins, you've got Chase Brown. You should have plenty for the Bengals side to put up some points on a Bears defense that was allowing a lot of points, and vice versa for the Bears. They knew they could score on the Bengals because every team scores on the Bengals defense. The Bengals defense is like the get-right game. Any team that's not having a lot of success offensively, come in and play the Bengals, and you're going to look great. And things were looking good for large stretches of this game. It looked like the Bengals had a chance because they got off to that early lead from Charlie Jones. Another first drive touchdown allowed, though, by the Bengals on defense. I think they've played 9 games. I want to say they've allowed 8 touchdowns on the opponent's first drive of the game. And, you know, I know a lot of teams, like, they script their first drive. They have got all the good plays all schemed up on the first drive, so maybe that's not that uncommon, but I can't remember a team giving up a touchdown basically to start the game on every single game of the season. But to the Bengals' credit, you know, they had that Charlie Jones touchdown in the bank. Then they came back with their own drive, scoring drive, but they had to settle for a field goal. They went up 10-7 after the first quarter. Bears came back, immediately scored a touchdown. 11 plays, 74 yards. After their first drive, it was 12 plays, 73 yards. Bengals defense just couldn't get off the field for these first couple drives. They went up 14-0. Both teams exchanged a couple punts. Bengals got another field goal from Evan McPherson after another long drive of 11 plays, 70 yards to make it 14-13 Bears. Bears converted their own field goal to go up 17-13. Then Bengals came back, scored a touchdown on that long pass to T. Higgins, made it 20-17 Bengals. Bears had another drive, 10 plays, 50 yards, ended in a horrible shank missed field goal by Cairo Santos, and that led them to the end of the first half. Bengals went into halftime up 20-17. Bears started the third quarter with the ball, came out, another long drive for a touchdown, 12 plays, 77 yards to go up 24-20. Bengals come back. They get their own drive for a touchdown, 6 plays, 69 yards to go up 27-24. Bears respond. They get another touchdown, 31-27 Bears. We go into the fourth quarter. Bengals are down by 4. They're driving. This is where Joe Flacco gets strip sack fumbled, but the defense is able to prevent the Bears from scoring a touchdown miraculously for once. That keeps it at 34-27 Bears after they settle for the field goal. Bengals get the ball, 13 plays, they drive it down 38 yards to set up an Evan McPherson field goal. They're down by 7, but they need points. So they go for the 54-yard field goal. Part of the reason they had to settle for a field goal was because there was a intentional grounding penalty on Joe Flacco. He was kind of, maybe he was a little bit flustered because he had just gotten sacked and fumbled the ball on the previous drive, but he didn't know where his outlet was, kind of threw the ball over to the left side. Nobody was in the area, so that what was a penalty moved them back instead of a 4th and 1 or 2, or maybe it was 3. I think it went from 4th and 3 to 4th and 13. So instead of that, Zach Taylor decided to kick the 54-yard field goal. Now, interestingly, after the game, because this field goal, it was 54 yards, the Jaguars in the same weekend set an NFL record with a 68-yard field goal that they made. Guys are drilling field goals from 60, no problem. Evan McPherson kicks this 54-yard field goal, comes up like 5 yards short, not even close. And so I was like, what happened? Did that get blocked? Did he slip? Everything looked fine. The snap was good. The hold was good. The only thing they said, this is kind of an excuse in my mind, but they said that the reason McPherson was so short was because he was kicking the quarterback like the regular ball that they would put in play when the Bengals were on offense, because they made the decision to kick the field goal at the last second. So instead of the K balls that the kickers are using, they were using the quarterback ball, which if the ball is inflated, like unless the Bengals are doing some kind of like Tom Brady deflate gate scenario where they're letting air out of the ball. I know they buff it up and they do all this kind of massaging of the ball to make the K balls better, but I mean, you still got to be able to kick the football. Like, you can't be making an excuse of, oh, it was the quarterback ball instead of the kicker ball, and that's why I didn't kick it that far. Like, you still got to kick that thing, man. I don't care anything about K-ball. So that was a weird play by the Bengals. It didn't really make much difference in the end because they lost by 5. But there was multiple times where you said, they had to settle for a field goal instead of getting the touchdown. They had to not get points here and there. But the Bears could have said that the same way because the Bears had 2 missed field goals in this game as well. They had a lot of points left on the board. I mean, it could have been, 65-60 or whatever. Bengals still probably would have lost this game. But after the miss by Evan McPherson, Bears came back, scored a touchdown. This was where the defense just kind of broke down. Kyle Monangai ran off the right end to the Bengals 17 after a 39-yard run, and then they ran a end around to DJ Moore, who foolishly tried to stretch the ball out over the goal line, and it looked like he fumbled through the back of the end zone. Cam Taylor-Britt hit him right when he was crossing the goal line, but Zach Taylor, so the officials said that the Bears were out just short of the goal line. Didn't score a touchdown. Then Zach Taylor said, hey, I want to challenge this to see if he maybe fumbled it out of the back of the end zone. At that point, the Bears were up by 14 with 5 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. So it's a understandable challenge by Zach Taylor to want to give them a chance to, take the points off the board. Unfortunately for Zach Taylor, he was correct, but the challenge of being short of the goal line, the play was reversed, but they called it a touchdown for the Bears. Instead of being short, they said, oh, actually, now that we had to go back and take a look at it, that was actually a touchdown for the Bears. So it gave the Bears an even easier touchdown than they would have had before. They went up by 14. Bengals came back on their next drive and threw an interception, and then the Bears got really conservative. They were up by 14 with 2.5 minutes left to go. They were just trying to run the clock out, and they had 3rd and 10. Britton Brown ran for 5 yards and then slid. It looked like he maybe could have been able to pick up the first down if he would have kept on his feet, but the coaches told him to stay in bounds and keep the clock running because they wanted the Bengals to use up all their timeouts. And so that's what they did. They ended up punting it away. Charlie Jones fielded it at the 45 and then ran directly sideways out of bounds. That's the Charlie Jones he had the one kickoff return for the touchdown. But then other than that, it was a lot of Charlie sideways in this game, but whatever. Bengals got the ball back. They go 4 plays, 55 yards, score another touchdown. Joe Flacco just carving up the Bears defense. He completed an 11-yard pass to Jamar Chase, 19-yard pass to Andre Iosivas, who got out of bounds on the right side, and then followed that up with a 23-yard pass right up the middle to Noah Fant for a touchdown, and they completed the 2-point conversion. They were down by 14. They completed the 2-point conversion to T. Higgins. They go get it within 6. Then they do the onside kick, something that the Bengals have not been able to recover since that Miami Dolphins game in 2019 that I so badly wanted them to lose so they could draft Joe Burrow. And luckily they did lose that game. But this game, Evan McPherson went with the onside kick. He kicked it at short of 10 yards. To recover the onside kick, the ball has to go 10 yards. This kick was going short, but a bad job by the Bears up guy. He had no awareness of where the football was. So he's coming up to block the Bengals. He doesn't even realize the ball is coming right at him. It hits the Bears guy in the foot, and then so the Bengals jump on it and recover it. They take it down, score another touchdown miraculously right after that. they started off with a 12-yard pass to T. Higgins over the middle, completed a 23-yard pass, again, deep to T. Higgins, 15-yard pass to Chase Brown, got them to the Bears' 7-yard line with about a minute left to go. And this was interesting because even though the Bengals were, at that point, trailing, they wanted to run some time off the clock. So that's why they ran it with Chase Brown up the middle and actually lost yards. But they didn't care because they came back on the next play and scored a 9-yard touchdown pass to Andrei Iosivas, a little bit of a redemption for the touchdown that he didn't get, and then kicked the extra point to go up by 1. 54 seconds left, up by 1. But I was sitting there. I was like, 54 seconds, Bears still have 1 timeout. That's a lot of time. We've seen like the Denver Broncos with less time than that. Kansas City Chiefs back in the playoffs against the Bills. They only had 13 seconds left, and they scored a touchdown. Anything is possible in the NFL, and unfortunately, the impossible became possible against this Bengals defense. As we know, didn't take long, and it was looking good. Everything was looking good. 1st and 10 for the Bears at their own 28-yard line, incomplete pass. 2nd down, Caleb Williams scrambles around, incomplete pass. So they get to 3rd and 10, 35 seconds left. Caleb Williams scrambles around some more, picks up a 1st down with his legs, picks up 14, and then they called their last timeout with about 25 seconds left to go. That's when they hit the 58-yard touchdown pass. Perfect pass, perfect play call, because they talked about Ben Johnson, the coach and offensive play caller for the Bears, said he had been looking for that coverage. I think it was 2 deep safeties. Jordan Battle and Geno Stone were deep, and then maybe they had man coverage underneath. I'm not sure exactly what coverage they were looking for, but whatever it was, they got exactly the look they were looking for. Colston Loveland was the number 1 receiving threat, and he had the speed to outrun everybody after breaking the tackle of Jordan Battle and Geno Stone. Ran 58 yards for the touchdown. Bears tried to get the 2-point conversion, but failed on that, so it didn't matter. Bengals couldn't muster much of anything in that last 17 seconds, and they end in defeat. I can't say that this was like more or less disappointing or heartbreaking than the game that they lost against the Jets or any of the other games that they've lost this season. I got to keep reminding myself that I do watch this for entertainment, so I don't get too high or too low about any of these. I mean, I got, I guess, an entertaining afternoon out of watching this game. There was moments I was cheering and getting excited, and obviously the end of the game I was upset, but that's what I wanted, right? It's better to watch that than a complete boring, like pedestrian game. I would rather have a crazy game that the Bengals lost in heartbreaking fashion than like just a boring, mundane game where like Joe Flacco had 150 yards passing and nothing interesting happened. I'll keep saying, even though the Bengals are losing, at least they're losing in an entertaining fashion. That's fun to watch for if you like football. If you only like the Bengals and that's the only reason why you watch, this isn't that much fun. But if you just like football, these games are pretty good. But win or lose, I try to remind myself and other people, you always got to be respectful of the players and coaches. I'll make an exception for Zach Taylor just because I don't really like him. And I'd say it to his face. I don't care anything about Zach Taylor. But, you know, Andrei Iosivas had a tough week. He said he deleted all of his social media because people were coming at him with a lot of negativity. And so he deleted all the apps off of his phone. And you hear that from time to time. But it's just unfortunate when, you know, these guys are going out there, putting their bodies on the line, trying to do everything they can to be good. They don't want to drop passes. They don't want to miss tackles. They don't want to make mistakes. So that's a part of the game, and you have to live with the good and the bad. But something you can't do is just like get upset at the players. And I don't know. I would say just keep it respectful. You can be upset and say the players, you know, the results obviously are not what they want. The results are not good. You can say, man, that was a bad loss. This Bengals defense really, you know, didn't live up to what they were billed as and all that kind of stuff. But when you go over the line and start like calling people, like saying personal attacks on people, that's too far. So I'd say, it's tough. It's tough to go through this as players and as fans, but probably more so than fans. They don't seem to understand. It's harder being in the locker room. Now, there were some reports by people in the locker room after the game that the Bengals defenders especially weren't taking this loss very seriously. There's a lot of laughing and joking going around. And when they asked for an interview with the players, they said, "No thanks, we'll catch you on Monday. Catch y'all on Monday," is what they said as they went out the door, which is a violation of the league rules because the players are required to make themselves available after the game to speak with the reporters. You can take a moment and, get your shower and get your clothes on, all that kind of stuff. But one of the league rules is reporters, they want to ask you questions. That's part of their job. And if you say, "Nah, I don't want to talk to you," it makes their job impossible. And maybe they'll get fined. I don't know. But Zach Taylor didn't really seem to have much of a problem with it. The only problem Zach Taylor had on Monday was the fact that Chase Brown said that he thinks the defense needs to step up, and it was, basically saying he was disappointed with the way the defense played. But he was just being realistic. But Zach Taylor, we can't be saying that because, Chase Brown had a couple of drops in this game. He wasn't perfect either. So you could say, well, there's no room for Chase Brown to talk about the defense when he didn't make all the plays on the offense. And the offense wasn't perfect either. No, it was a team effort. So you don't want to see the team turning on each other. And that's kind of one of the things that these reporters in the locker room seem like their goal is try to bring in some division, make some drama in the locker room so they can write a better story. Oh, there's fighting going on in the locker room and I'm in there and I'm writing about it. But really, that's not what you want, obviously, as a team. So some of these questions are, how frustrated are you with the defense? And what's it like when you guys on offense go out there and the defense doesn't hold up their end of the bargain? So these are kind of leading questions that they're being asked. And I understand why they can slip up and fall into that narrative. But that's the thing. The Bengals players and coaches get this media training. So it's not even a fact of, it was just a spur of the moment thing. They popped this question on you. They've probably been coached on that, what to say in that situation. And Chase Brown said the wrong thing. That's probably more why Zach Taylor might be upset with him. It's not like they don't want the players to have an opinion. They don't want the players to say anything real. They want them to be fake, be phony, be like Zach Taylor. Just say a bunch of nonsense that doesn't get quoted anywhere. The only quote we saw was Zach Taylor says, Chase Brown shouldn't have said that. Like, what kind of quote is that? But that's what Chase Brown has got to put up with now. He can't even speak his own mind. But that's part of the reason I do this podcast, so I can speak my mind, not from a player perspective, but from a realistic, honest perspective, something that you don't get a lot of times. If the team wins, you hear about how the team is great, everybody's doing a great job, they're the most amazing team ever. If the team wins, you hear about how they're the worst team ever, everybody sucks. There's no in between. So I try to, unfortunately, maybe for me, I take the, realistic middle of the road approach. Don't get too high. I take the Joe Burrow approach to this whole thing. I'm in it for the long haul. I'm there. Apparently Joe Burrow pieced out as soon as possible. The reporter said they came in the locker room and Joe Burrow was heading out ASAP. I don't blame him either because has Joe Burrow ever thrown for as many yards as Joe Flacco did in a game, 470? I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and look at it. I know he got close to 500. I think he got to like 490 something at one game. So he's thrown for this many yards. But even if Joe Burrow was playing in this game, they still would have lost. Joe Flacco, Joe Burrow didn't make any difference because neither one of them plays defense. Neither one of them is going to go out there and make a tackle when the Bears are running down the field on pass or run, doing whatever they want. The quarterback for the Bengals is not going to make a lick of difference. And that's why I continue to say, as the losses for the Bengals pile up, Joe Burrow should just call it for this season. He should do all his rehab, do everything he needs to do to get back as soon as possible. But as soon as possible should be next year. I don't want to see Joe Burrow out there for the rest of the season. It's going to be tough because Joe Flacco's dealing with the shoulder injury. But if he's able to go, like I said, no Jake Browning. That's all I'm asking for. I don't care if they lose every game. If they score 40 points and they lose with the Joe Flacco, so be it. But no more Jake Browning. That's all I got to say. Maybe I'll watch the film. I haven't watched like the all 22 to see like exactly how bad the Bengals defense played, but one, since it's the end, I'll stick with some negative. I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to stay positive, but there were a couple of negatives in this game. Obviously, they lost, but Jamar Chase dropped a touchdown. He had the touchdown perfect pass from Joe Flacco in the right corner of the end zone. It was on a kind of a fade pass. Had it right in his hands, dropped it. And it may have been nullified. I don't know if they would have called it good or not. But on that same play, Orlando Brown Jr. got a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty because he was like trying to choke some guy. I think it was Sweat for the Bears. Sweat was on the ground. And then Orlando Brown was like trying to hold him down and had his hand around this guy's neck, basically, which he obviously didn't care for. So that started off like a big fracas. A bunch of guys were pushing and shoving after the whistle. And just a stupid penalty by Orlando Brown that took them from having it right on like the 5-yard line all the way back to like 20-yard line. They had to settle for a field goal instead of being in position to score possibly a touchdown. So that took maybe 4 points off the board. There was also a drive earlier in the game. They had to settle for another field goal where Orlando Brown Jr. got called for a false start. And this was a legitimate false start, not like all the other false starts Orlando Brown has like every play. But this one, the Bengals were trying to make the Bears jump. Joe Flacco was doing the hard count. They were doing the motion. They're, having guys do everything they could do to try to make the Bears jump off sides. The Bears weren't falling for it. And then the guy over Orlando Brown did a flinch. He flinched, but he didn't get in the neutral zone. That's the critical difference. Flinching is not illegal. You can flinch as much as you want if you're on defense. As long as you don't go into the neutral zone, it's not a penalty. Orlando Brown reacts to this guy flinching and acts like, he puts his arm out, simulates the start of the play like, we got you, but it was a false start on Orlando Brown. And I was like cursing at Orlando Brown in the moment because that was a pretty dumb penalty. If the guy, I know it's hard not to react in that scenario, but when you're trying to get them to jump off sides and then you jump, looks pretty stupid. But I can't really say like Orlando Brown Jr. was the worst thing out there. I'm going to say the worst thing out there was the Bengals defensive line and linebackers didn't really come to play. They don't blame the scheme. They all say it's not the scheme, it's not Al Golden. But then they say, we just got to make a play. Like that's what Zach Taylor says. Oh, somebody just got to make a play. Just got to make that play, that one play. But they haven't figured out how to make that one play. Maybe during the bye week, they'll work on getting that play. They seem to have been working on the tackling. It didn't do much good in this game, but that's something else they can work on. They continue to lead the league in missed tackles by a wide margin. Unbelievable how many tackles the Bengals miss every game. I don't know. But this season is an interesting one. I'll give it that much. This season is drunk, as they would say. I'm going to have to, the Bengals are forcing me to drink. I got stuff going on in life. I don't have time to be drinking, but the Bengals are going to force me into drinking, which I don't really want to do. I got to fight the urge, but it's so difficult. This Bengals team, I felt like I was having some kind of a hallucination watching this game. It seemed unreal that they could lose a game and then seemingly win the game only to lose a game again. Truly remarkable what this Bengals team is doing this year. They're going to break some kind of records, probably in a negative way, but this is going to be a record-breaking performance either way. And nobody's going to get fired. Unbelievable how most of these guys are probably going to come back next year and they're going to tell us, this year was just a one-off anomaly. Joe Burrow got hurt. That's why we gave up all those points to all those teams, even though Joe Burrow doesn't play defense, but whatever. Anyway, I'll be back on the next episode. We'll have a bye-week review maybe. I don't know what we're going to do in the next episode, but subscribe, turn on the notifications or whatever. I'll be back sometime. Don't worry. I'm not going to die like Meow Mix podcast, who they teased me. They said they were coming back, and then they said due to overwhelming response by former players, which I'm assuming is like Jonathan Stewart, they're not coming back and recording another episode of the podcast, which I don't understand. Jonathan Stewart podcast is terrible. So I would much rather listen to Meow Mix than his podcast anyway. But this podcast will be returning before you know it. So until that, I'm going to leave you with a hooday and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.